Hey there, everyone! Today, we're diving into some head-scratching decisions from Who Made Me a Princess, ones that have left fans frustrated. If you haven't read the novel or the manhwa spoilers, you had been warned. We are listing of chapters and frustrations and what went wrong. Why is Lucas, one of the most powerful characters, barely used when the plot desperately needs him? Where's Emperor Claude, the key figure in the royal family, when he's supposed to play such a major role? And what about Jeanette? Introduced so late with little to no impact, yet somehow stealing focus. Stick around as we explore how these missteps affect the story, and why they matter for Athanasia's journey and the overall pacing of the narrative. Let's start with Lucas. The story hyped up Lucas as this all-powerful magician, only to bench him when it actually needed him the most. Like, why introduce a character with god-tier magic if he's just going to stand around and do nothing when it actually matters? It makes no sense. And the worst part? This left Athanasia, our main character, doing all the heavy lifting. She's already struggling to survive in an imperial court that wants her dead, navigating her complicated relationship with her father, Emperor Claude, and then, on top of all that, the story decides, hey, let's also make her the one to fix Claude's amnesia. Meanwhile, Lucas? Nowhere to be found. Why? What was the point of making him so powerful if, when the plot actually needs him, he just disappears? Let's rewind. Lucas is introduced in chapter 17, and right away, he's established as this ancient, incredibly powerful magician who has been alive for centuries, maybe even thousands of years. He's cocky, confident, and so strong that nothing really phases him. Then, Claude loses his memories, something that should be a minor issue for someone like Lucas to fix, and what happens? He just leaves in chapter 44. And guess when he finally comes back? Chapter 69. That's 25 chapters of him being gone. Okay, fine, maybe he was off doing something important. But the problem isn't just that he was missing, it's that when he does return, he still doesn't do anything. And let's be clear, Lucas and Claude aren't even friends. They don't have a personal bond. Lucas is only really connected to Claude through Athanasia, but even then, you'd think he'd at least do something when the Emperor of the Empire, Athanasia's father, has completely lost his memories. Now, let's put this into perspective. If you were an ancient, all-powerful magician, and the father of the only person you care about suddenly loses his memory, wouldn't you, I don't know, fix it? Just wave your hand, cast some magic, and be done with it? But nope, Lucas just stands there while Athanasia has to struggle through it on her own. And here's what really gets me. The novel actually handled this better. In the original story, Lucas literally just whacked Claude with the world tree and fixed his amnesia. Quick, effective, makes sense. But in the manhwa? They completely nerf Lucas, drag the amnesia plotline way longer than necessary, and make Athanasia do all the work. And just when you think Lucas is finally going to do something, chapter 83 happens. Lucas has the cure in his hands. He has it right there. And what does he do? Absolutely nothing. He just stands there while Athanasia has to fix it instead. This is the same Lucas who attacked the world tree because it refused to give him a small fraction of its branches, but now, when it actually matters, he suddenly can't do anything? Make it make sense. This is the biggest problem with Who Made Me a Princess. The story introduces these insanely powerful characters, Lucas, this ancient magician, but then refuses to use them when they actually matter. Instead, it forces Athanasia to do everything. And at that point, what's even the point of giving Lucas all that power? If he's not going to contribute when the plot needs him, why is he even here? And look, I love Athanasia as a protagonist. She's smart, resourceful, and constantly trying to survive in a dangerous world. But at some point, you have to let other characters contribute. Otherwise, it just feels like the story is deliberately dragging things out for no reason. Claude's amnesia should not have lasted this long. Lucas could have easily fixed it. But instead, they wasted his potential and made Athanasia carry everything. Alright, let's talk about Emperor Claude. Because, honestly, his entire Amnesia coma Sleeping Beauty arc in the Who Made Me a Princess manhwa was one of the most frustrating, drawn-out, and unnecessary plotlines I've ever seen. And here's the thing, Claude having amnesia could have been an interesting development, if it hadn't dragged on for more than half the entire story. But that's exactly what happened. From chapter 46 all the way to 101, Claude was either suffering from memory loss, in a coma, or just completely useless. That's 55 chapters of him being nothing more than a plot device. Now, for context, the manhwa only has 125 chapters in total. So this isn't just some minor subplot. Claude being out of commission took up nearly half the series. And who had to deal with all of it? Athanasia. Once again, our protagonist was forced to carry the entire weight of the story while the manhwa just wasted time. Let's go back to season 1. Things were going great. We had tension, political intrigue, Athanasia trying to win over her cold, murderous father while navigating palace life. And then, boom. Claude gets hit with amnesia in chapter 46, right at the end of season 1. Now, amnesia itself isn't a bad trope. If done well, it can create drama, force characters to grow, maybe even reveal something new about their relationships. But that's not what happened here. Instead, season 2 forces Athanasia to suffer through Claude not remembering her for 35 whole chapters. And as if that wasn't enough, Spoon then decides, you know what? Let's make it even worse and puts Claude into a coma in chapter 83. Because apparently, watching Athanasia struggle for one season wasn't enough, so they made her take on the entire empire in season 3, at 14 years old. And let's talk about that. Athanasia is already one of the most overworked protagonists in any Isekai story. She was humiliated in court in chapter 51, forced to flee the palace in chapters 53 and 54, and had to endure season 2 with a father who literally could not remember she existed. But then, just when you think things might be looking up, nope. Claude goes into a coma, and suddenly, this teenage girl is expected to run an empire. Like, at what point is enough enough? Oh, and just to add another layer of unnecessary stress, her uncle shows up and accuses Claude of using black magic to steal the throne. So now, Athanasia isn't just fighting for her father's life, she's fighting to keep the entire empire from collapsing around her. And Claude? He doesn't wake up until chapter 101. That's 55 chapters of pure suffering for Athanasia and 55 chapters of nothing for Claude. It's ridiculous. Here's the thing, normally, a story follows a 3-act structure: setup, conflict, resolution. Season 1 did this well. We had the setup, Athanasia trying to survive, the conflict, winning over Claude, and the resolution, forming a fragile but real bond with him. But then? Spoon threw all of that out the window. Instead of building on Athanasia's progress, season 2 reset her relationship with Claude back to 0. The amnesia made their entire development irrelevant. And then, instead of resolving it in a reasonable time frame, Spoon dragged it out for an entire season. And just when Claude finally starts to regain his memories, they knock him out again. At that point, what was even the point of making Claude important in the first place? This storyline wasn't just frustrating, it actively hurt the pacing of the manhwa. The plot stalled for over half the series just to keep Claude as a source of conflict. And the worst part? It didn't even lead to any major character growth. Athanasia didn't need to prove she could run the empire, she already knew how to survive under pressure. The only thing this arc did was make her suffer for the sake of drama. At the end of the day, Claude's amnesia and coma arc wasn't just a bad decision, it was lazy writing. Instead of giving Athanasia a natural, character-driven conflict, the story just took her father away and left her to fend for herself. Instead of using Lucas, who literally had the cure in his hands, the story stalled for the sake of dragging out drama. Instead of showing progress, the plot went in circles. And look, I love the Who Made Me a Princess concept. But when half the story is just Claude being a vegetable, you have to ask, was this even about Athanasia's journey anymore? Or was it just a series of unnecessary obstacles to make her life miserable? But hey, that's just my take. What do you guys think? Did Claude's amnesia and coma ruin the pacing of the story, or do you think it added something meaningful? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, I have plenty more to say about this series. Now, let's talk about the most frustrating, useless, and unnecessary character in Who Made Me a Princess, Jeanette. Because, let's be real, this girl could have been replaced by a dog, and the story would have played out exactly the same. Actually, scratch that, a dog would have been more useful. At least a dog can warn you about danger. Jeanette? She just stands there smiling while everything burns around her. Now, I wouldn't have had a problem if Jeanette had just stayed a side character, or even if she had gone full villain. That would have been interesting. But no. Instead, midway through Season 2, in Chapter 60, we suddenly switch from Athanasia's perspective to Jeanette's, as if this girl has somehow earned the right to be a secondary protagonist. And let me tell you, she has not. The problem? Spoon didn't develop Jeanette as a major character from the beginning. She didn't get proper build-up, she had zero agency, and worst of all, Athanasia was basically forced to excuse Jeanette's naive behavior to the audience, like we were supposed to feel bad for her. But why? This girl actively made Athanasia's life harder at every single turn. And I'm going to break down exactly how she did it. 1. Jeanette was introduced too late to matter. Jeanette was first mentioned in Chapter 3, but we don't actually see her until Chapter 24. And she doesn't get a proper introduction until Chapter 31 at the debutante ball. Now, for a character who's supposedly important, that's already way too late in the story. But fine, let's roll with it. Where things go completely off the rails is Chapter 60, when Spoon suddenly decides that Jeanette needs to be a main character. But here's the thing, if you want a secondary protagonist, you have to develop them properly. You don't just throw them in halfway through and expect the audience to suddenly care. Spoon had 125 chapters to work with, and instead of focusing on the main protagonist, she suddenly threw in a completely unnecessary POV switch to a character who had done nothing to earn it. And you know what makes it even worse? Claude, the actual emperor and a major character, never got his own perspective. He was introduced as early as Chapter 5, had a massive impact on the story, but never got a first-person POV. Yet somehow, Jeanette, who has contributed nothing but problems, gets one. Make it make sense. 2. Jeanette has no agency, she's just a puppet. One of the biggest issues with Jeanette is that she has zero agency. None. She doesn't make decisions, she gets dragged around by other characters. First by Duke Alpheus, then by her father, the previous emperor. And because she never actually does anything on her own, Athanasia constantly has to explain and excuse her behavior to the audience. Like, why is our protagonist being forced to babysit this girl? And here's a perfect example of why Jeanette's lack of agency is a problem. Let's talk about Chapter 92. This girl knew that Claude was sick back in Chapter 83. She saw him collapse. And yet, when her father, the same man accusing Claude of using black magic to steal the throne, brings her to the palace, Jeanette just goes along with it. No thoughts. No questions. Just vibes. Then in Chapter 93, Jeanette has the nerve to be frustrated that Athanasia isn't telling her what's going on. Girl, what do you mean? Athanasia is 14 years old, running the entire empire, taking care of her unconscious father, and dealing with political chaos. Where do you think she has time to sit down and give you a play-by-play? You're literally standing next to the villain, and you want to act upset that you're being left out? And just when you think she can't get any worse, she joins the villain in Chapters 110 to 111. And what happens? She gets used as a pawn. Like, obviously. She's not a player in this story, she's just a piece that gets moved around by everyone else. And guess who has to clean up the mess? Athanasia. Again. 3. Jeanette's story ends with no explanation. And then, finally, after dragging down the plot for dozens of chapters, Spoon decides Jeanette needs to do something. And what do we get? Nothing. No actual character growth. No logical build-up. Just a sudden decision in chapter 113 to give up the throne and go into exile with her father. And you'd think, after forcing us to sit through her perspective for so many chapters, this would be the one moment where we actually see her thought process. Right? Wrong. Instead, the entire scene is shown through Athanasia's perspective. So let me get this straight, Spoon went out of her way to force Jeanette's POV into the story, but when it actually matters, we don't get to see her thoughts. What was the point? What did Jeanette contribute to this story that made all of this worth it? The answer? Absolutely nothing. At the end of the day, Jeanette wasn't just an annoying character, she was a waste of space. She had no agency, she added nothing to the story, and every time she made a mistake, it was Athanasia who had to clean it up. If she had just stayed a side character, fine. If she had become a villain, great. But forcing her into the spotlight without giving her proper development? That's just bad writing. And what makes it worse? She stole focus from Athanasia, the actual protagonist. Instead of spending those chapters building up Athanasia's struggles, relationships, and personal growth, the story wasted time trying to make Jeanette relevant. And for what? Nothing. Because, in the end, even her final decision was given no depth. So yeah, if you ever feel like Jeanette could have been replaced by a dog, you're absolutely right. At least a dog would have been loyal and useful. But Jeanette? She was just a glorified plot device with no purpose. But hey, that's just my take. What do you guys think? Was Jeanette an unnecessary distraction, or do you think she actually added something to the story? Let me know in the comments, and if you liked this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe, I've got plenty more to say about this series. Alright, and that wraps up today's episode. We've explored some incredible themes and deep dives into character dynamics, and I hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as I have. Before we wrap up completely, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Whether you've been with us from the start or you're a new listener, your support means the world. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with future episodes. We'll be back next week with more stories, insights, and, of course, plenty of twists and turns. If you love Who Made Me a Princess, check out this what-if story that we created. Until then, take care, and remember, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop imagining. See you next time.